Hello, mighty one. Welcome to the Charlotte Anime Book Club podcast. I am your host, Aspirety, the benefactor of Kazamatsuri, and here joining me today we have Bizkitdoh, also known as Tasty Mediki.
It's pointless.
Papa Peeps, aka Death Flag Kun.
Hello.
And Bowie.
Yeah, that's me.
This week on Charlotte, episode Charlotte, where we find out about Charlotte without seeing Charlotte, and hey, this story just started taking itself seriously. Our new protagonist sees you as a threat to the stability of the power user's lives and confines him to the facility while Ayumi just goes along with everything. Yu has fun with his new friends and only spares a moment for Now rip our other two main cast. Shit goes down and Orma Family Kun ruins everything, causing Pooh and Now to get captured, tortured, and the Brotherhood decides to send their final trump card after to save them. Of course, things go horribly wrong and he loses his make everything better power, causing Pooh to die, saving Now, and then they fucking torched it! What the hell is up with that ending, guys?
What kind of a decision was that? Like, seriously? How do you go and make such a great episode and then just ruin it by showing that you clearly don't know anything at all about what the artist actually wants to have done? Fucking PA works.
Yeah.
Okay. Just need a second,
Off camera, Aspie fucked that up twice before he actually got it right. Just saying. Who's the real master? Let's just start with generally, how did you like the episode? And then as a second question, how do you think the episode fits in with the series as a whole? Pepe, you go first.
All right. How did I like the episode? I thought it was enjoyable as a form of entertainment. I thought it was good because I was excited at the stuff that was happening. I thought the drama was pretty good. Like it genuinely took me for 30 minutes, and it was something that I was able to really get myself absorbed in, which I think is good. However, I have some bad points which I'll probably talk about later. How does it fit in with the whole show? It's way too sudden, man. It's just it's way too unexpected, I think.
Unexpected?
Yeah.
I've been expecting this from episode fucking 1! What the hell? Like, this should have happened long ago, I feel like. This wasn't unexpected. This was late. This was overdue.
I'm being more specific here. It's not the sudden baddies coming to attack that's unexpected. It's the actual thing that attacked them that's unexpected.
What, you mean the terrorists?
So, yeah.
You saying that the terrorists are unexpected?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I already kind of said this, and I mean, you don't really have to agree with it, but I would say that I feel like we've been waiting for some sort of antagonist force of something for a while.
That's true.
Now.
And all this time, we've thought the antagonist force would be the scientists. A lot of people were expecting the scientists to come in at some point and fuck shit up. That's not what happened.
Which
like you were thinking that it was the school itself that was gonna fuck shit up.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway.
Well, honestly,
I
even
did. And I was wrong, and that's fine.
Even the scientists
But-
that you're talking about have been just this sort of faceless entity. Like, other than one episode, and even then, all we saw was a bunch of security guards. For the most part, we never even saw what they were supposed to be.
There was like this weird like mix where like we referred to them as the evil scientists, and then we talked about the Brotherhood, which kind of turned out to be something a little bit more positive.
Mm-hmm.
But there was always just kind of this desire for something, right? And we just didn't know what the name or the face was going to be. And whether or not that'll even be fleshed out, who knows? But as far as I'm concerned, like, there's been a lot of just little pieces in the show so far that have just made me just keep wanting to know something's got to go wrong here whenever you have such an immense amount of power. And it started to actually just completely come into form in two different ways. The first thing was whenever they started talking about time leaping and how, like, the presentation kind of changed. Because, like, whenever they did the time leap, and they showed, like, the previous timeline or whatever, there was kind of these security guards and stuff, and it was kind of reminiscent of like how the school has this security force, right? And now you have Shunsuke, who has this underground lair where it's the scientists working, and then in the time leap, or the other time, it was kind of the same thing, right? It's almost like that's kind of where he got his inspiration from. But so, like,
Yeah.
you had these two things, and it's almost like whenever there was, like, a time leap, it's kind of like things just kind of shifted, as far as the presentation is concerned. So, like, you could have, like, one force that's kind of like an antagonist force, and then now that's kind of they're kind of like the defending force, like how the school is basically kind of like what the facility could have or was, but it's much nicer. But when you take that and then you talk about this episode specifically, where like they actually like kind of spoon fed it to you at the beginning, I think, in the first half of the episode, where it was like it started to become kind of really apparent. And this is where I would say you could call this like bad writing, but I think it was like there was foreshadowing, but it was like way too sudden.
All the foreshadowing
because it was in the same episode, right?
was in the same episode. Yes.
Yeah. It definitely starts with the phone call to Furuki, and then they start talking about the witch hunting and stuff in the past, and that's whenever I started to feel kind of uneasy. Where I was just like, oh, well, this is going to be kind of important pretty soon.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, especially whenever I had already kind of had that idea that something was going to happen.
Yes, that's something I've been waiting for a very long time. The politics of the lives of the power users should be more important than it has been up until this point. That's what I kept feeling. Like, there's all these kids wandering around with supernatural powers that could change the course of the world. Like, we even had it foreshadow with stuff like the scientists and how they're using these powers to create weapons for war. And it's like, this is really interesting stuff. And they've kind of been glossing over it for the entire series, I feel.
It's like what I said with the Brotherhood idea way back when, as I said, like, there has to be someone somewhere who's using these powers in a negative light, right? There's gotta be.
Absolutely.
It's like the world is not a perfect place. There's gotta be somebody.
Yeah.
And that's exactly a topic that they brought up, is that there's probably, powers that be overseas that are probably already getting ready to band together and make some shit happen.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I felt wasn't foreshadowed well enough, because I personally, especially when it comes to works of literature, works of fiction, I think foreshadowing is a very important part of this pieces of fiction that can really get the reader more absorbed into the world that they are coming into. Because like a lot of people, I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of people who did think it was sudden. They might be wrong. They might not be wrong, but that's what they felt.
I think it's sudden. I think it's sudden to a degree that it was an intentional like shock factor.
So with a decent amount of foreshadowing, the viewers could have looked at it from a going forward perspective. Like they could definitely get themselves invested ever since the past episodes that there are people who are using powers to do bad, and we might see them in the future, we might not see them in the future, but when they do come, it will still be a shock because we don't know how they'll come, but they do come. Like if for example it was the scientists that attacked them, then there would still be a shock factor, right? Depending on what they do.
You could refer to like the terrorist force as kind of like there's like the mix of the idea of witch hunts, and there's also like the idea that they could be a mercenary force working for scientists of another nation that are looking to try to corral.
But we don't know that, right? Like
no, you don't. But I also don't think that. Well, I understand the foreshadowing idea is definitely, you make a good point. There are a few ways I'll respond to that. One is the idea of the anime being something that's in a third person's perspective, and this was the topic that came up, and then how this anime is very much so almost like a VN perspective,
yes,
where
we're
like 95 to 99% of the time we're you. You're you, like, all the time. Like, everything that he sees is what you see. Everything he thinks is what you think. And that's pretty much everything you get, right?
You is you.
And the only things that really stand out as changing this are the scenes where, specifically this episode, where we follow Kumagami. And that scene just speaks to me so much as your typical key VN perspective switch. Whereas I guarantee you that would have been a moment while they're planning whatever they're going to do, you're probably in Kumagami's shoes and having to go through the horrible experiences that he's going through his eyes. And I feel like seeing that was something that was very important.
I think that if we focus too much on the first-person perspective, especially in the medium of anime where we can't hear the character's thoughts and emotions, not like in a VN or in a book, then we have to use perspective to a better advantage. Like, I think they should, if they use anime to their...
I think that's actually a pretty good testament to the fact that we're talking about Maeda, who doesn't write for anime. So I think that's I think that's a very fair
one
point.
thing that I noticed, like, after talking about it over the week. A lot of it is very first person. A lot of it is very VN.
I don't particularly think that makes it bad per se. I think it just makes it a very different thing and not something you would expect, which is definitely something that we're seeing. Another thing that I would respond to. Could it be a waste of the medium? Possibly. Because they could take advantage of these things. But I still think that they're taking advantage of a lot of other things pretty well. But a lot of that ends up going onto PA Works' shoulders to try to present that in the right way. It's just like how in Angel Beats they tried to do a lot of things visually, but not a lot of it really worked out. But anyways, another response that I would have to that is we have to think about airtime. We're talking about 13 episodes. And could they do it? Well, sure. But in a situation like this, it's kind of hard to really do it. Because we have to make sure, like, when I think about, okay, well, what if they did a scene in a previous episode where they foreshadowed these events by showing the terrorists or something? I think that would be a problem because when I think about the series as a whole, personally to me, I feel like if you took away almost any scene of any previous episode, barring some comedy, maybe, and even that still kind of like is a nice flavor towards character development, I feel like it takes away from the series. I feel like almost anything that you cut would just make it worse because it's already super tight.
Even the baseball episode?
Even the baseball episode. And to further add to that, you mentioned the idea of showing other power wielders that are using their powers in nefarious ways. Well, that's exactly what we got. We already saw that with all the other characters It's like, it's not full blown because they don't want to remove the shock factor of it being as horrible as it is. But we already saw characters who were using it for kind of nefarious means, with the exception of Baseball Coon, who kind of was still cheating, but it was there. And it's like how I was saying even back then is that it's kind of weird how you're seeing these people and they're kind of not doing the right things with their powers.
Mm-hmm. It's been a theme from the very start.
Number one, I don't want to give a specific example of foreshadowing because I'm not a writer. I know that any example I can give is a bad example because I'm not a writer. But I know it can definitely be written in a better way, and I know that they can definitely spare one line of dialogue or two that would give just the right amount of foreshadowing that wouldn't sacrifice anything, I think.
Well, like, for me, I'm a huge fan of, in literature and in writing, of subtle foreshadowing, not throw it up in your face and make it deathly obvious. For a good example of that, if you watch the first episode of Gakugarashi, they do a excellent job of using just little visual cues just to throw just a little bit of foreshadowing. And I think they could have got away with that in Charlotte, even if it was something as simple as if you was walking down the street, or if you see him pass by somebody, say, reading a newspaper, and it's got a headline that there's been an accident that's unexplainable. A car flipped over. Just little things like that. Or walk by a TV that's having a news broadcast that somewhere overseas there's been an attack.
That would be a great way of foreshadowing,
Rewrite did that really well too, because it foreshadowed so many of the elements that wouldn't become relevant until much, much later, early on.
So, Bowie, I guess that's why you always notice these little things in anime and VN, like you did with Air.
Well, that's just been something that I've always loved. Is I hate when things are too in your face with something because it feels like there's talking down to you with their writing. I like feeling that
Little
they're
Monsters
appealing.
anime.
Exactly.
Neo root.
I like when it feels like they're appealing to your intelligence. Like, we're going to give you something that is a clue, but you're going to have to work at it to find it. We're not just going to give it to you. You've got to go find it. And that's just been something that I've always been a fan of. And
Yes.
like I said, I think Charlotte could have definitely benefited from a little bit of that.
I also don't think that it takes away from not doing that, though. Well, I think it's a benefit. I still think that, well, why does someone like me or Aspie see it? Why does Bowie see the, like, here's another example, like, people were talking about, why is now in her underwear? That's unnecessary. Okay. Has the entire series, at any point in time, even given you even a little glimpse of them panties?
Nope.
What? Why
Now,
do people care so
boom,
much about that?
it's all just out there, right? And that's a shift, right? And it's like, it's not particularly foreshadowing, but it's something that is there so that later on it becomes something that you value greatly because you're just kind of like, oh, I didn't see that shit coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you
I
look
will
at
I will never ask for panty shots ever again in my life.
If you look at what foreshadowing really is, it's a setup to work towards a payoff, and that's really the way that I looked at that is the same way. They've set you up. They've used all these little visual things.
They set up your expectations.
Yeah, they've set up your expectations. They've shifted your view from what it may have been going into it towards a certain other way, and then all of a sudden, whenever there's that payoff, it's got that much more impact to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think perspective is
I
really
think the
important
now and the way,
because
works out.
I feel like this is why it's something that's so polarizing and so hit or miss for people. It's just some people don't. Not everyone thinks the same way, and not everyone's kind of going to end up at that. No one's going to buy into it, and maybe some people will think that's better, and people like things a different way. It's just going to come down to opinion, right? So, like, that's why I say, like, as a final line of defense is that, well, it's there enough for me, and for at least for me to say that I've been waiting for this for a very long time.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
None of the form it came in isn't what any of us expected. But there's also the fact that we treat every episode as like, oh, so this is the main like conflict of the story. Oh, this is the new climax. But it keeps changing. Like, in episode 6, that was the big deal. In episode 9, that was the game changer. In episode 11, this is the game changer. But they've all been Monster of the Week.
And it all is, like, in
know.
regards to tone, it's all, like, been a really, really good curve of tone shifts. Like, every little aspect of the show has been, like even in episode, I think it was 3... whenever Jojiro impaled that dude in the alleyway, I was like, yo, that's kind of hardcore. Like, I wasn't expecting that. And
I like that.
like,
actually.
now got punched by that dude, and it didn't really seem all that bad. She kind of shrugged it off. I was like, whatever. And then we come to an episode like this where, like, there no holds bar on their gore and on, like, throwing down. So, like, it's been something that's just been very subtle.
Can we at least reach a point of contention where we believe that this could have been foreshadowed better?
Yeah, like if it was foreshadowed better, I'd give this series a 10 out of 10.
I'm addressing Biz specifically here.
Okay.
Do you agree that this could have been done better, Biz?
Sure, it's a 13-episode anime from a dude who doesn't write anime in 13 episodes.
Okay, so we're not really disagreeing that much, I don't think.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. But I also think that there's, like, could it be better? Probably. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't foreshadowed differently.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'll agree with that too. You know, I think it's important that we understand that, like, we may have these little disagreements on things like this, but in the end, like, I feel like there's some general points we can all agree on. And that's definitely it, I think.
Yeah.
It could have been done better, but that doesn't make it terrible. There will be some people that disagree. I know there are many people in the forum that have been very vocal that this episode is terrible, and the lead up to this episode has been terrible. If Yared was on, I'm sure he'd be able to speak for that that vocal group. But he's not, so whatever.
So his point doesn't count.
I'm trying to acknowledge his point of view here. I don't know. You need to keep an open mind about this kind of thing. Yeah, so let's move on to a different topic.
Okay, so on the most part, I enjoyed the episode, but there was just one thing that sort of sort of caught my eye and kind of annoyed me, and it's really not contained in the episode, it's throughout the series. But there were, I think, a few continuity problems throughout the series to this point. The big one, or there's a couple of big ones. The one that sort of first got me is how would the terrorists know about the time leap ability in the first place? Since considering they're from a complete other country, and by this point he's lost the ability. But then the big one that sort of I noticed is whenever they're talking about Ayumi regaining her memories, and he says it's completely impossible. She'll never get her memories back.
Yeah.
But a couple of episodes back, the first time Yu is brought to the big bad underground shelter and they're talking, Shunsuke asks Pooh, he, like, right whenever they first get there, he sort of pulls him aside and he's like, Yu still hasn't regained his memories?
Yeah.
And Pooh tells him, he's like, no, he hasn't got his memories back yet. Well,
yeah, that is weird.
which way is it? Is it impossible, or is it he hasn't regained his memories yet?
Yeah.
Why is it impossible for Ayumi, but we're wondering if Yu has got his memories back yet?
There's even bigger problems than that with regards to memory.
There's a lot of really weird things going on about the whole memory and time leap thing.
If I might cut in, Yu never does regain his memories. He doesn't remember his life with Shunsuke.
Yeah.
What he does regain is that memory of the alternate timeline, which he also should not have.
Yeah.
And I still don't know how he regained it.
And I love Pepe for mentioning that.
I hope
I mentioned it.
Yeah, you mentioned it, but I love the way Pepe says it. Like,
hey, I mentioned it on Skype like days ago.
Yes, it doesn't make any sense that he has the memories from the other timeline. That's true. It doesn't make sense. But the fact that those specifically are the memories that we're, like, kind of talking about, because whenever he talks to Ayumi, he's telling Ayumi that he wants to get, like, he wants her to have her memories back from, like, this timeline. And he says that's impossible.
Yeah.
And it's also, that's true, because Yu doesn't have his memories from this timeline either. Like, those memories are factually, they don't have them. And they shouldn't have them. Now, what's confusing is that he does have memories from the other timeline, as we've all understood now.
Yu refers to it as a dream, actually.
Could this be a big writing problem? Well, we'll see.
I hope not.
We'll definitely see. But the fact that this is like, it feels like a rabbit trail almost, where like there's like this very clear acknowledgement of these memories that has been brought up multiple times, but none of them are really exact. It's like kind of dancing around like the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
So like it's almost gotten to the point where like the first time I heard about it, I was like, "Oh shit, that might be a real problem." And then it happened a second time, and now a third time. I'm just kind of like, "Okay, wait a second." It almost feels like this is intentional, and I feel like there's probably going to be some other power at play.
Well, I want to bring up something because I was in the episode 10 podcast and halfway through I lost my internet, and there was something I wanted to bring up then and couldn't because I fell out at the halfway through it. But we were talking about memories in that episode, and I noticed something in that episode whenever Yu first sort of has his snapback during the concert, and he wakes up and he's listening to the music on the computer in the research facility. The first thing he says is the end is or this is right after he was listening to Trigger, and he wakes up listening to Trigger, and he says, the end really is amazing, no matter what happens in the future, or I don't think I will ever be able to forget this song, no matter what happens in the future.
That was very interesting word.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, like, it got me thinking, and I'm just wondering if maybe it has something to do with, Sala? Was that her name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because
Sarah.
We're assuming she had a power.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if her power might not have something to do with memories, and that may have something to do with why he's able to remember from this, having memories he should not have.
It's still pretty fucking weird that it's from another timeline, though. Like, how do you even explain that? Like, if there's any explanation, it would have to do with Sala, but I am very concerned that it won't be a satisfactory explanation.
Almost like if there
Well,
is
that's
an
the running
explanation,
theory
I
now.
feel like a lot of people just like people who are like super. It's almost like there are other aspects and key things that people aren't happy with. But anyways, it's not the first time where even if it does kind of get a partial explanation that may be deeply rooted in the fact that it doesn't really have one, that people who are kind of like time freaks and stuff will probably still just not be satisfied anyways.
Yeah.
So I guess be prepared for that.
You can't make everybody
with,
happy.
With this
Even
foreshadowing,
if it does end
I'm
up
gonna
being
expect
something as weird as Salo's powers make it so that people can remember very specific things, people will probably still be like, "Oh, that's bullshit."
Yeah, pretty much.
When my response to that would be, people having superpowers is bullshit. So,
it.
That's weird.
Alright.
I would say be prepared for that.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very prepared for the worst.
Yeah.
But I would just say that in regards to all of that, I feel like it is definitely intentional questioning at this point.
Yeah, so just going back, I guess Bowie brought up the point of like how they know about the time travel, and I know that brings up a lot of questions. Like maybe they just had this whole plan planned out like years ago. It's just so thorough that if anything were to like really go wrong with it, then they'd know that time travel was involved. It's a bit of a stretch, but I can kind of see where they're going with it. I think that's kind of what they meant. Doesn't mean you can't intelligently use time travel to like manipulate factors and like do it outside of their awareness, I reckon. But it is a bit odd, but I understand where they're coming from with that. Cannon brought up a point. I was talking to him earlier about how like he reckons it was a really, really dumb decision to put you into this situation. Because Yu is their last trump card. He's the only one with the time leap ability. So putting him in a situation where it is quite possible that his time travel ability could be disabled because Shunsuke already knows about, blocking off your vision means you can't use it. He should have acknowledged that risk, and that was completely disregarded here. And they sent him in anyway, and what do you know? His time travel was disabled, and now they can't do anything about it. Perhaps a smarter move would have been to keep him at the base. And even though they said not to, and it's a really delicate situation, they could have still tried. They could have still sent people that aren't you and try to deal with the situation. And then if they get it wrong,
as Cannon
time
says,
travel
use
back.
guns.
Yeah, use guns. But just
Does anybody know how many time leaps that it might have taken before Shunsuke's lost his vision?
it's very
A
vague.
lot.
But
Yeah.
It's vague, but it's a lot.
it's
I mean, it looked like a lot, but it seemed like not as much as you would think. I don't know.
it could
Probably
be as-
more than 10.
Especially
think.
whenever he went from being just kind of not being able to see to boom, blind, just like that. He seemed to have a pretty good gauge of a substantial amount per time leap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a number around 6 in my head.
Yeah, I was gonna say 5 or 6.
Yeah,
I'd
So,
say it's more.
it's vague.
I guess my response to that would be, he's got a point. They definitely could abuse the fact that time travel here is fucking OP. And they can just kind of keep rewinding and just kind of going piece by piece.
Yeah.
But a couple pieces that I think are interesting is that Shunsuke says, in regards to going back far enough to try to subvert the plan, he said that there's no guarantee that the actual location would be exact, which would go into contrast with what he says to you, where he's like, just think of this moment, just think of this moment, just think of this moment. And I kind of wonder if he was kind of being maybe he was taking a risk there and really trying to get with you and try to control that ability if possible. But that would just be one interesting point there, is that there could be a precision issue. The other thing could be that it could be an issue with, if they have to keep retrying and it is as delicate as it may be, then they could fuck things up really easily many times.
And you would
they
go
need
blind.
to be very, very smart to get around it.
Yeah.
But
But it's still
and you could go blind.
it's still safer than sending their last trump card in.
But there's another thing that I wanted to say is that I also don't feel like Shunsuke is all that bright.
Yeah, that's a good topic.
I don't think he's that. I think he's almost like overconfident.
He is
And,
charismatic, that's for sure.
When you think about what Shunsuke did and why he lost his eyesight, and he did have to redo things so many times because he just kept fucking up. First off, well, he kept fucking up, so he wasn't very good at it. Maybe you would have been better. We don't know. But eventually he got somewhere, but it cost him basically everything. But he's being like really, really, really. He wants to support you having the power to be able to do this, and I feel like that's just bad judgment.
You felt
not
like
bad
it was
writing,
bad
but I feel like Shinsuke's bad judgment is coming.
I still blame Shinichiro for being the one to suggest it, and then Shinsuke just being all right. Let's go with that.
I feel like he was just thinking,
he's
like,
the biggest idiot.
Well, we don't really have an option here that I can really think of, so we're gonna go ahead and go all in with this.
Yeah, it was definitely like Pepper was saying when we had a talk that this is probably less bad writing and more just bad judgment, and it shows that Shinsuke isn't perfect.
The reason I want to say that I feel like that's the way. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but I feel like that's the way you should think, is because there's a very, very interesting part of this episode focuses on Shunsuke telling you what he needs to do when he arrives. Right? He's like, take them over and take their powers, and when you take their powers, check them for weapons. And that's what Yu does, and it's all for naught, because neither of them have powers, and neither of them have weapons. So Shunsuke's plan was shit, and I feel like that just kind of like really plays into it.
Everyone talks Shinsuke up as like their mighty leader who's like so amazing, but really he's just like, I feel like he's just an idiot who's tried a lot.
Just another guy.
Yeah,
a lot of his decisions were suggested by things he saw or heard from other people. Like the idea to make a school was suggested by you. The idea to win the lottery was suggested when you watch TV.
I think he's really strong, and like he's definitely very motivated, and I like him. But at the same time, I don't think that I think he's just got bad decision making, and like, I mean, he's kind of young.
Yeah.
There's just pieces of this that kind of, it makes more sense to think that maybe he made the wrong call. And I mean, there's so many other factors that come into play about this, and this is part of one of the things that I think this episode is fucking amazing. Is like, whenever he's talking about the whole situation is basically his fault.
Yeah.
Because he made a bad call to have Furuki even there. He knew that he had a family, so he has a liability, and that is exactly where things came. It bit him in the ass.
Yeah.
And when you go even further to the fact that he's given away everything to get where he is now, and then Kumagami's dead, now he like really, really doesn't have anything. That's part of the reasons why I feel like one of the important directions in this episode is that Shunsuke is going to just be like, he's just going to be like a drone. Like, he doesn't have anything left.
Yeah, that's like...
He gave up everything and lost.
Like I told Khan before, I got past the point where I judge fictional characters for making stupid decisions. So even if they're being dumb, I can accept that as long as the story works around that and shows them, hey, you were being dumb, and they learn from it.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Biz mentioned that even if the roles had been reversed, you may have been able to do a better job than Shunsuke, which I'm not positive because I don't think you really has the same charisma to like pull a group around him. But if you remember when they're talking about the plan, Yu points out to Shunsuke, he's like, I can handle all this as long as there's not a hidden enemy. If I can't see them, I can't do it. And then that's what happens.
Yeah.
They bring out boom, flashlight.
They should have. What would have been the ample plan would have been to try and use a couple lives, and like see what their layout is.
Yeah.
And then make your plan based off of that.
I agree.
So anyways, like, getting down to it, we end the episode here where, like, Shunsuke's gambled everything that he's ever had and also lost. So, when you think about that, it's I remember I mentioned it earlier about how you could be like taking advantage of trying to go back in time and save Ayumi. I feel like that's basically what Shunsuke became, where he was just so focused on trying to save the world and trying to do all the right things that he went too far.
Yeah.
And maybe he should have relied on other people a little bit more or something. I don't know what else he could have done, but basically he's lost everything now. And the gravity of the situation is definitely going to hit in the future.
Mm-hmm. And you know what made me love this episode? The fact that we lost our make everything better power, and now shit is finally starting to like hit everyone. Like we can't go back from this.
There was somebody else that said that you might not want to be too sure about that, and I think that that's valid. I think that they could pull something out of their ass and bullshit their way out of it, but I really hope that they don't. Really hope that they don't.
We start again for
well, I have no qualms about having time travel as long as they write it correctly.
And that's true. I had said before that a really cool way to end this series would be to just like Yu gets his time travel ability back, and then they find out that the situation is just like Shunsuke, where he kept trying to fix the situation. I feel like Yu could take the opportunity to just say, fuck the situation. And I think that it would be amazing if he went back in time super far and just prevented anyone from coming in contact with space dust. So that none of them develop powers.
Okay.
And then they're completely free of it from themselves.
The
world may still go to shit.
Very hard to stop a meteor comet.
Well, they just don't inhale the dust. I don't know.
He just runs around in front of everybody waving a fan.
Yeah, fuck face masks. Fuck fine now.
Shoot nuclear rockets onto the meteor. I don't know.
Oh, this is terrible.
Well, we'll find out.
We will find out.
Well, I'm glad that you think
the
that
key
my
point is
by
next episode, both you and Shunsuke are fucked emotionally.
But what my view is there's a lot of little aspects about this show that are extremely bittersweet, and that while everything really got fucked up, their immediate threat is no longer there.
That's true.
Or at least they can find a way to get rid of them. And they could just go back into hiding and call it good. Until their powers disappear. So that's one possibility. But there are other aspects of the show that I think are really good utensils for like just bittersweetness. Like, for example, if one of the things in the series has been Yu and now its development, which is a severe problem with the show that I've had for the past few episodes has been now just not being present and getting wubbified by Shunsuke and just kind of becoming super irrelevant whenever I felt like she was super great.
No comment
like,
on Yusa and JoJo.
They don't really matter. I don't really care. If they don't have anything important for the rest of the series, I don't think it would really bother me any, because I never really expected much out of them to begin with. I had a few fun ideas for them.
Why are they there?
Yu and Now has always been...
For some reason.
They're the side main characters.
Yu and Now have always been massively important. And I think that that's the most important thing. But as far as Yu and Now is concerned, I was thinking it'd be like really great for there to be some bittersweetness where like Yu is getting all of this like motivation and stuff from him liking Now, but it's been pretty clear and cut and dry that Now definitely just hasn't really turned any of that back to him.
That's true.
So I was thinking there'd be some total bittersweetness of one-sided love, and I would love that.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of things about the tone that I think could fit in really well with this idea of expectations. This idea of like Yu's ego and him thinking he can get whatever he wants, and Shunsuke thinking he can save the world, and basically just people in general having this idea that they can do these things whenever they should think a little bit more realistically about it.
That's so true. Even now, like, kind of, she's always, like, very goal-oriented and very focused, and maybe the realization that she can't have everything she wants. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, people like to talk about narrative, and I still think it's too early to talk about, like, the overall message and stuff. But, granted, I think that's That would be kind of my idea of something that would be really cool.
That would be a good. That would be a good direction.
But I think that would make the series super valuable as well.
Yeah, like
there's so many directions this series can go, so it's really, really hard to say.
I keep telling everyone that this is post-anime because it's the thinking man's anime. It's not the same as typical. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's there. You just kind of have to fill in the blanks yourself. Is it bad writing? I don't know. I think it's kind of cool.
Either way, yeah, as you said, there's so many places we could go from here. Like, Shunsuke's broken, Yu's broken, and we need to come back from this somehow.
Kumagami's broken.
Kumagami's very broken.
Maybe we just accept it for what it is.
Ayumi's still sheltered.
I just really hope they don't like bring back time travel, because removing that crutch, because like we've been depending on that for the last few episodes, as like kind of like it really like devalues the importance of everything in a way, because you can just do it over again.
I think it was Nick that said time travel has never been like the main plot point.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
But it is a crutch, and now that we've had that stripped away from us, it's like, oh god, like the shock value is even bigger.
It's just like Maya talking about the expectations of, oh, not this shit again, right? Like, that would be the perfect... Like, there's been so many Maida-isms in the series that have been like, fuck you, like Ayumi's cold, and stuff like that. Like, fuck you, it's not key aids. Like, this would be a really great moment of, fuck you, it's not Deus Ex. Like, we've removed the key magic from the scenario.
Yeah.
I think
We'll
that would be
see
very
about
bold, and I
that.
would love that.
Yeah.
I hope so too. Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll find out next week on episode 12, Promise. We finally get to find out what the promise to come back home is. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. It's been a very exciting episode. Lots of very heated opinions, and definitely something we need more of on this podcast, I feel like. Especially thanks to Biz, because I know you've been like tirelessly like campaigning against the forum, who seem to have opinions that disagree with your own. And I thank you for sharing your opinions here, because I find those especially valuable in this context.
When one man stands alone.
So yeah, we'll see you next episode. The new episode will be airing shortly in a few hours, so make sure you check that out. Post on the forum, share a discussion, and we'll be sure, if you say something really interesting, we'll be sure to mention you on the next podcast. So until then, guys, take care.
Alright, should we stop now?
That was unnecessary.
Oh.